Hello and welcome back to Plague Projects. Today we are going to do a fantasy galaxy painting on a canvas board. I found this project to be really fun to do and is also really easy. I know that painting can be really intimidating, especially if your brush skills are lacking as mine are, but this project is really great for that because there are no real fine details that you need to paint. This painting is made entirely of very large brush strokes, which makes this project pretty stress-free. Not only that, but it's space. What in the world is prettier and more naturally abstract than space? Alright, let's get started. If you have registered for the program and picked up your supplies, you have everything that you need. The only thing that I would suggest is that wherever you decide to do your painting, you make sure you can't get paint on that surface. I put down a couple layers of paper towels, but the best thing to do is to put something like a plastic tablecloth down. If you are following along with your own supplies, you will need an 8x5 by 11 inch canvas or some sort of multimedia paper. Really, the size doesn't matter, but that's the size that I used. You need one large brush, one small brush, one small sponge, 3 cups. I used a large cup with a diameter of 3.5 inches, a medium cup with a 3-inch diameter, and a small cup with a 2.25-inch diameter. You also need the aforementioned tablecloth cover, water to wash your brushes, blotter paper for your brushes, and last but not least, paint. The basic colors you need are light blue, dark blue, black, white, purple, pink, and green. If you want the specific colors I used, the brand is Apple Barrel, so you should be able to find that at your local craft store. Anyway, the colors are bright magenta, purple iris, cobalt hue, white, Caribbean, black, and crisp green. For your base color, you will be dipping your big brush in the light blue color and covering your entire canvas with that color. I liked doing an up and down motion, but really you can do anything. This is all about you being creative with paint. Really, the swirlier, the better. Once you have your canvas completely covered, you are left with a choice. You can do like I did here and use purple, or you can do the darker blue. When I was planning this out, I used slightly different paints from my house, and I got a slightly different effect, as you can see here. I used a sky blue and the darker blue. The darker blue has a really nice effect, as you can see. At the time of filming, I did not have the darker blue yet, but I did have purple, so I used that. Once you have chosen your darker paint, you will take a little bit on your brush and kind of randomly brush in different areas of your canvas. You want both the lighter color and the darker color to be distinct on the page, but you don't want them to be too distinct. As you can see, I blended the purple a little too much and I had to put more on. If you put too much of the darker color and obscure the lighter color, all you have to do is put a little more of the lighter con on and brush that in. Once you have that done, you should leave it to dry a bit. Lucky for you, these are acrylic paints, so they do dry really fast. Once your canvas has dried a bit, we can now start making the clouds and land on our planets. The first thing that I did was to take my cups and figure out where I wanted my planets to be. In this painting, I decided that I wanted the bigger planet on the bottom right-hand corner and the 2 smaller ones on the upper left-hand corner. I did a big enough space between the bigger and small cups because in that space is where my Milky Way is going to be. Now that I know where my planets are going to be, I can start to work on the clouds and land formations. We are going to do that with the sponge that we provided for you. In this example, I had forgotten to do the green first, which is what you should do. The reason for this is so that it looks like the clouds on the earth are covering the land. It is okay if you forget, like I did, and I'll show you how I did that. So to sponge, I started with the white. Just so you know, the sponge should be damp before you use it. I made this mistake and the sponge did not like it. Once I did that, I dipped my sponge in the white paint and then sponged it on my palette to take off some of the excess paint off of the sponge so I wouldn't get any blobs on the canvas. I had this on hand, but really you can use your blotter paper or some sort of plasticky surface you can get paint on, like a yogurt lid or something. Since we have already decided where the cups are going to go, we have to make sure that our cloud formations are going to be under those cups for when we paint the black background. Once we have that, we can start sponging the canvas. As you can see, I started with one line going from right to left. That line is pretty sharp, so you do want to feather it out a bit. I did that by going over it a couple times to make sure that the white looked a little less clear. After that, I made a few branches off of that line to make more clouds. Then I defined the middle of those clouds with some more white paint. This way it looks like the clouds are thicker in the center and thinner towards the edges. I did the same thing with the top portion. Once we have the white down, we can make the clouds have shadows. I use the purple to distinguish between the different branches of the clouds. You don't want the purple to be super dark, so remember to blot excess paint off of the sponge and do light dabs. Ah, yes, the green. Like I said, I completely forgot about the green. Really, what you do is similar to how you sponge the clouds on there, although you don't have to be as careful of being light-handed with the green like you do with the white or the purple. You just don't want to have globs on your canvas. I went light because I had to do it over the clouds. The reason I only did it on the bottom larger planet is because my thinking was that this would be the planet and the other two would be the moons. Next up, we're doing space. Now we have to paint space. The first thing that I do is to finalize the places where I want my cups. The pieces of canvas that are inside of the cup are going to be visible after you paint the background black. So you want to place them so that you can see the sponging that you did, but also see the original background as well. As you can see, I placed my cups so that one side of the planets have the clouds visible and the other side has the background visible. Now that those are placed, we are going to paint our background black. Remember to wash off your big brush with water to get all the blue paint off. Then we will be painting the background black. Make sure that you are holding on to the cups when you are painting so that the cups don't move. This is a pretty easy step. There is no real finesse to it. Just brush that black on. When you are done, you can remove the cups and clean up the edges of your circle with a small brush and some black paint. This time though, you don't want to let the background fully dry before you start sponging on the galaxy. Time to make a Milky Way. We make our Milky Way like we did our clouds on our planets. We take our clean sponge and we use white first to sponge on where we want our space dust to be. Remember to rinse your sponge or at least use a different part of it for the white paint. I want mine to be in a strip in the middle and on the corners by the planets themselves. The reason that you want the black paint to still be wet is because you want a smoky effect to make the space dust look see-through. With the wet paint, those areas start to look gray instead of just having a distinct black and white spots. You do want to build the white in certain areas, so just pick them and put a little bit more white on there. The reason for this is so that the pink and the light blue that we are going to put on there would be visible. You also want to make sure that the white is dry before you put any other color on the white, or else it will turn into a mess. Trust me, I know. The next thing that I did was to take the lighter blue color and, like before, make sure that you do not have too much on your sponge and dab it on the edges of the whites that you put down. I put it so that the blue was facing the planets for the most part. You just want to put enough so that you see the blue and you still see some of that white peeking through. So just put a little bit on. For the pink, what I did was to mix a little bit of the white and the pink that we gave you, so you get this lighter baby pink color. Once you get that light color, you want to sponge that under the blue or at the edges of the blue paint. I did it so that the pink was further away from the planets than the blue. Again, you don't want to put too much paint because you want the white to come through. For the purple and dark blue, you want to sponge it sponge that on so that it's further on the edges like how you did with the pink. It's sort of like a gradient, with the inside color being light blue to pink to purple and to dark blue on the edges. I didn't have the dark blue with me when I filmed this, so I only used purple, but it does give an extra something when you use the dark blue at the very edges between the galaxy dust and the darkness of space. This is an example. As you can see, I put a little bit too much white on my canvas, so I did go back in with the black and the sponge and sponged a bit of the edges and a little bit like inside of the areas that I painted with the white, and kind of dabbed the black on there just so that you can tell that the space dust was a little less concentrated in those areas, just to make it look a little cooler. So once you have that, we have to make the stars. Before we make the stars, we have to protect our planets, and so we do that by putting the cups back on them. We want to do this because we don't want any stars on our planets. To make the stars, it is a little bit tricky to get good splatters with the large brush. I found actually that using a fan brush is better for this, but if you don't have one, that's okay. I will show you how to do the splatters with the large brush that we gave you. So the first thing that I tried to do was the technique that I used for the fan brush. You do that by hitting the paint-filled brush on your finger, like I'm doing here, to splatter the paint. I also made sure that the paintbrush didn't have too much paint on there, or else I would have had really big splotches of paint, and that wouldn't have been quite as nice. The problem with this is that the paint splashes that came off the brush were quite large. That is good if you want a few of them, but it does give you larger stars. But what you also want are smaller stars, and this technique does not give you that fine spray of paint that you need to make the stars that are smaller or further away. Because of that, I had to switch techniques in order to get that fine spray of paint. Again, you dip your paint in the white paintbrush, making sure that it isn't dripping with paint. You don't want that much on there, just enough to splatter. In order to spray the paint, use your thumb to push on the hairs of the brush so that they splatter the paint. You don't want your thumb on the part where the paint is. You want your thumb to be near to where the handle of the brush is and push there. If you push the area where the paint is, all you're going to do is take the paint off the brush, and then you will have paint all over your thumb. When you're doing that, you have to make sure that you are pointing the brush downwards onto the canvas so that you get the paint there. So the paint also doesn't just splatter onto the canvas, it does splatter around the canvas too, and actually even further away than that. So make sure that you account for that and kind of make sure that the area that you are painting in, the paint won't damage anything. This is acrylic paint, so it does kind of come off real easy with water, but just so you know, it did splatter a lot. As you can see, I was using my hand as a guard to make sure that the paint wasn't going anywhere that it wasn't supposed to be. This didn't necessarily work all that great, but it was better than nothing. So once you are done with that, you can take your smaller brush and paint a couple of stars on there. I made a little streak there at the bottom, as you can see, and also a little star at the top, but then I promptly stopped because it ended up looking kind of messy. If you have better brush skills than I do, you can paint as many stars as you like. This project was really fun to do, and you can make it as differently as you like. Your planets don't have to all be the same color. When I was experimenting, I made this one that looks like Mars. There are many different planets in our solar system that you can make like this. Think of Jupiter. That one would look awesome done in this style. Or you can make your own planets too. You can be as creative as you want with as many different colored planets as you can imagine. All you need is a little bit of paint. I hope that you had a great time making this project with us, and we will see you next time on Plagued Projects.